Hola, friends. That means hello in Spanish. My name is Host Eric, and I am the host of Talking with Spanish People, the YouTube channel that just keeps on giving. Tonight, I've titled the live stream Personality Type Q&A. Which means I'm relying on the good people of the internet to provide cues for me to A. On the other hand, if you'd like me to question you and you provide an A, I can do that as well. The point is, you should be here either providing cues, providing A's, or anticipating the provision of either cues or A's. How am I? There's a cue. There's a cue. I appreciate that. Let me consider how to answer this cue. I am fine. How about you? Now, I've asked you a cue. Cue balls or low-hanging curve balls? Any kind of balls, as long as they're teabagged onto my mouth. Hi, Countess. How are you? I don't know if you're aware of this, Countess, but tonight we're focusing on Q's, A's, and the conjunction of the two, Q's and A's. Meta-analyst, analyst, executive, and executor. And I made a couple of mistakes in that last video about this. So it is not the truth that all executives have TIFE. INFP and ENTJ are not TIFE. That was a mistake of mine. Hey, Octavio Silva. Maybe I better ask, what is on your mind lately? Good question, Dark Phoenix. What's been on my mind today, or this evening anyway, except for when I was at work, in which case what was on my mind was nuclear weapons. But it's been the idea that we ought to be able to achieve consensus on the fact that there are four fields: external metaphysical, internal metaphysical, internal physical, and external physical. And, if we could just begin with getting everybody to agree on that. And because, that seems like, if you want to tell me there's an additional field somewhere, name it. I can't think of any other additional fields for attention. And I can also not imagine understanding attention without talking about the possible fields upon which attention manifests. Okay, well, that's what I'm saying, Joel Nathan Henry, is right now there's not general consensus that this is true. Okay? But it is true. And so I'm saying this is the reality. This is the change in the status quo I'd like to make. In other words, I'm making a predictive / normative claim, not a descriptive one. So it doesn't make sense to argue against it descriptive as though it were descriptive. You see? Why your ESFP is it could be answered in a number of different possible ways. A better way to put that is, this is why you keep doing the thing grammar expert, okay, or punctuation expert. So let me explain the phenomenon from an ENFP's perspective in talking to either an ENFP or an ESFP and getting into arguments about logic stuff, basically. So when it comes to TI stuff, ENFPs and ESFPs are like a person who's been handed a list of all the punctuation marks and been just told, hey, you put these around various words and, oh, right. I was thinking about that too tonight. The answer to that is particularist universalist configuration. I don't have a better answer than that right now. So imagine I'm at some sort of English teacher symposium, and I'm doing a presentation on grammar up there, and in walks, in this analogy, the ESFP or ENFP. In this analogy, they walk in and have been given all the punctuation marks like that, but not instructed about them at all. And so, they stand up during the presentation. Yes, you, please, what's your question? And they go, my question is, hyphen, that I'm concerned, colon, about, semicolon, period. And they say something about grammar. It's my belief that a prepositional phrase can work as an adjective. And you're wrong about this. And you go, okay, first of all, I never said prepositional phrases can't work as adjectives. I said they have to work as either adjectives or adverbs. So you got that fact wrong there. And then, second of all, why do you keep putting punctuation in random spots in your sentence? And then the ESFP or ENFP goes, are you saying I don't know how to use punctuation? I'm a punctuation expert. And then they put even more punctuation marks in to prove they're a punctuation expert. And you go, but you're not using them correctly. And they go, what do you mean I'm not an expert? I am totally an expert. And they go, period, comma, semicolon, the, hyphen, period, 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 reason, comma, you, comma, period, hyphen, 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 think, comma, period, semicolon, that, period, 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 is because you just want to be right. And you go, I don't know what to tell you now. They know so little about, in this example, the person knows so little about grammar or punctuation that when you try to point out that they're not using the punctuation correctly, they just toss more punctuation in there willy-nilly, as though it wasn't subject to any rules. It was just the symbol of punctuation. What do you mean you can't see me? You can see me. I can see me. I'm very visible. So that's the experience of dealing with ENFP or ESFP about TI stuff. They always come in and they think they know what TI is and they know how to use it. And then, but really they're just putting punctuation marks in random spots and saying they're a punctuation expert because they're using lots of punctuation. Like this right here. This is fucking textbook polar TI. Joel Nathan Henry, your first language doesn't change. English hasn't been my first language since I was 8. Think. This is the sort of shit that drives me insane, right? A person is coming in here trying to argue with me on any TI frame about any TI matters. But then we'll say things like that and think it doesn't matter how they use words. Bullshit, Countess. Bullshit. Eric, you're wrong about everything and you're an ESFJ and that's not a failure to understand English. That's a choice to use it badly. You meant LVL? What does that mean? Who? Me? You want me to tell you that, or you want someone else to tell you that? Okay, but you're clearly fluent enough in it to communicate your ideas. So it's like everything you've said to me heretofore has made abundantly clear that you believe I'm not responding to your questions, that I'm not answering what you say, that I'm afraid to deal with your important points that you're making and stuff like that, right? Now, that's absolutely not true. The reality is I'm up there doing a lecture at a grammar conference, and you're somebody who comes in on the street with absolutely no knowledge, who presumes he knows a lot, and is asking questions that are so wrong, I don't even know where to begin. So it's not a language issue. It's a Dunning-Kruger Effect thing. It's exactly what it is. I mean, like that, Joel and Henry. I can't tell if you're, and I don't know how aware you are of how ridiculous that sounds. If you're just, or if you're, I mean, are you joking? Are you, I don't know if you're even joking. I would hope you're joking, but you might be serious because, again, it's like, it's Dunning-Kruger thing. You know so little about it that, yeah. Now, I'm making an analogy, Joel Nathan Henry, an analogy. I'm not saying TI is punctuation. I'm saying it's the analog to punctuation in the analogy. No, I mean, it's true. It is the case that ESFJ antipolar and ESTJ antipolar look a little bit different, but it's mostly okay. So what's your point then, Joel Nathan Henry? That I shouldn't pay any attention to what you say? I mean, are you trying to use your type status as a justification for being wrong and not being subject to correction? Is that what you're trying to say? I don't know what your point is. Your point is I shouldn't expect you to have a point because you're FI tool? That I should agree with all of the wrong things you say because you're FI tool? Because when you say those wrong things, you convey to me that you'd like me to concede that point or agree with it or something, or engage with you about the point, right? So what's your point? Okay, again, Joel Nathan Henry, why are you getting mad? When you ask a question like that, it's non-responsive and not ignores everything I say and everything I'm trying to do here. That's why I a lot of times ignore you. But Joel Nathan Henry, it is your point that you want me to respond to you and engage with you. That is your point. You made it multiple times. So, I mean, the thing is, we won't ever make any progress if you lie. So you can't lie. Like, you have to acknowledge, yes, you have made that point multiple times. You do want me to engage with you. Okay, but you do want me to engage your points. You've said that multiple times, that I'm ignoring your questions and all that stuff. You have said that. So that is true. Don't deny it. Exactly. The alternative to me engaging you is ignoring you. That you don't like that. So I'm engaging you. Now, of course, remember, if you're going to be intentional, what is your point is the question I keep asking you. You bounce from thing to thing, willy-nilly, as though you're untethered to anything you've ever said before. So what is your point right now in this second? because I know it'll change 1 second from now. It does not do to leave a dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. Good point. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than it does knowledge. Correct. And it's referred to as the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And the thing is, Countess, it's true, he says, quote unquote, condescending things, but the reason that they're so offensive is not that they're condescending. A lot of people are condescending. It's that they're condescending with so total little reason to be condescending. He's not saying things that make sense. If you want to be condescending, be smart. So what is your point? That English is your first language? You have to dumb down everything here? That you're ESFP? That TI is, let me say, TI is yeah and yeah. TI is punctuation? No, wait. Point was, NE is talking and TI is punctuation. I did address that directly. I said, no, that's the analogy. TI is not punctuation. And I wasn't saying anything about NE at all at the time. So, that's no Countess. That's so TE. I like to make sure the thing is resolved. So there was a lot of FI in that video call you did with Rachel. I should hope so. She's my girlfriend. Those are responses to my rants. I'll say, okay. If I am, in fact, ranting, then we ought not give much legitimacy to my words. So I want to know, Joel Nathan Henry, what is the distinction between a rant and not a rant? What makes what I say worth it? You know, basically saying we can dismiss Eric completely what he's saying because he's just ranting. So I want to know, what is it that makes when I'm talking a rant versus when it's not a rant? I did scroll up. Your point was TI is punctuation and NE is talking, which just is, you're not listening. You're not thinking. I have looked at every single one of your things here. Many sense BS. I tried to warn you way back in the objective versus subjective function, physical versus metaphysical. I never said at the beginning of this video anything about what people actually sense. You're making a basic mistake here. I'm not making a descriptive claim. You're responding to it as if I am. Now, look, the challenge for me is I'd like to not brutalize you to the extent that I can not brutalize you. But it gets very difficult for me to not hold you in contempt when you are so determined to waste my time. That's all you're doing. You don't have anything interesting or meaningful or responsive or true or right or sensible to say. Like this, many sense BS. Okay, what I began the stream by saying is I would like to get this community on consensus about this true point. So are you trying to say that I have inherency on this point? That in fact there is a need for consensus because many people sense that BS? That would be fine if that's what you're saying. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know. You say scroll up to find your point. Is that your fucking point? It's not meaningful about anything. It's not responsive to me about anything. And then your next point is that's why you're a ESFP. So it's okay for you to just be a problem, a discursive problem for everybody else, and for everybody else to have to deal with your complete lack of rationality. And yet we should still listen to you when you make bullshit random claims. We shouldn't just ignore you. You see the problem here? So again, you didn't answer my question, did you? There's the problem. You're not answering my question. My question was, what is your point? My other question was, what makes something a rant? If I disagree, you just say you disagree. Why go on a rant? Because I'm not stupid, so I disagree for a reason. Just disagreeing doesn't mean anything. That's the kind of stupidity you do. Well, ass face, I like your name a lot, by the way. I'm smoking Earth OG. Joel Nathan Henry, I will note to you that, quote unquote, your initial points none of them are either Q's or A's. I mean, I don't care what type you are. Even you must realize that you aren't going to get any points by saying, I thought this was a Q and A. That's why I came in and never made a Q or an A. Don't be so annoyingly stupid. And I won't have to have this conversation with you. I've tried to avoid it for a long time. But you're not just annoyingly stupid, you're persistently annoyingly stupid. You've got that ESFP stick-to-itiveness. Well, you know what? I'd recommend you don't stick to this particular plan of attack because the current plan of attack is I will be as stupid as I can be. And that's not a good plan to stick with. Yeah, I do see it as a source of problems. Absolutely. I see Joel Nathan Henry's anthill kicking, pointless anthill kicking, as freaking barbaric. You know, it's pre-civilized behavior. It undermines the ability of people to engage in discourse that solves problems. What about me, Joel Nathan Henry? Look at me, what? The fact that I'm expressing a little bit of emotionality renders everything I'm saying irrelevant? If that's what you're saying, you're simply reinforcing my point, which is at a certain level, and you're getting there, stupidity becomes malignant. I mean, this is the thing. I'll tell you, Taylor, it's not more fun for me necessarily. Like, I always recall this debate, quote unquote, I had with Rabble Repository, who was an ESFP. And it's It's no more interesting to me than it would be for LeBron James to play an 8-year-old girl. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I don't like SE in general. At least to put it this way, I don't like it when SE is treated as either an absolute value or a primary tool. So that is to say, I don't dislike individuals who use extroverted sensing intentional modality. I dislike the ways in which it manifests in certain circumstances. Like, I don't ever want to be forced to do something before I feel the deliberative process is over. I want to have plenty of time to think about it and then eventually do it. Like, I talked about getting an aquarium for months before I actually got one. That's how I like SE to be. I don't like shit with a ticking clock. I like turn-based time where I pretend as though the passage of real time doesn't matter. The statuses remain the same, untouched until I return to them at my convenience. I prefer that illusion over the reality of ticking clocks and opportunity windows that close and mistakes that are unsalvageable by spinning and explaining away and stuff like that. I don't like that world. And that's the world of SE. Well, a lot of people, when that show first came out, I started hearing people tell me, "You've got to watch this show. It's like this guy is just like you." You know, is that common in the INFJ? I highly identify with that. You mean the attitude towards SE? Not exactly. Eric, I have a question. Is it possible I failed your test at any part and still be EHP? Any possibility? That the music test? I don't know how definitive that music test is. That's the first time I've ever even considered testing like that. So just sort of, I don't have enough information about the reliability of the test to answer that question. If you failed a bunch of my other NE tests, one right after another, or scored definitely not dominant, because on the NE test I can score basically one of 4 scores. Almost definitely polar, almost definitely dom, or definitely not polar, or definitely not dom. Those are basically the 4 scores I can get by administering a series of NE tests. I can't get any more precise as far as the slots than that. That requires me to do the TI stuff of evaluating all the data in conjunction with each other and see what produces the most consistent overall story that's the least negatable. Yeah, come on, assface. Please. We'd like you to reduce the vulgarity to ribald. From vulgar to ribald, okay? Can you manage that level of tonal adjustment? For me, time is always flying for some reason. Is it flying when you're not looking? In which case, you're probably intuitive. Eric, why do you think ISTJs partake in penance so frequently, seemingly significant more than all other types? I don't know that that's the case, or I've never even thought about that as a measuring stick, how much penance a person does. What would that look like? Because, I have an ISTJ friend, Cameron. I don't really ever recall him noting any sort of penance inclination, but that's just one guy, so I don't know. What does it mean to be TE polar as an INFJ? I mean, most of all, it means an allergy towards structured behaviorism. I guess that's the clearest way I can put it is, or at least the most concise way I can put it. The clearest way I can put it is, if you tell an INFJ, let's say you're a parent of an INFJ, and you go, INFJ, listen, if you get good grades this whole quarter, then at the end of the quarter, we will give you $500. That will not work. If you say, if you don't, you will get the following punishment. That will not work. INFJs cannot stand, don't get the concept of, hate the concept of, and generally are offended by the concept of behaviorism. Behaviorism is a phenomenon of a TE frame. It views human beings as processes, the mechanics of which can be exploited to control. So, I mean, this is why deontology is a TI thing, and utilitarianism is a TE thing. Deontology says it's not okay to exploit and use people without seeking their fully informed consent. But TE says everybody ends up being useful to other people in some ways or in others. And so what we do is we don't worry about those rights and stuff, and we just try to maximize the good for everybody. The problem is, of course, with that frame that the TE user doesn't begin by acknowledging that the measuring of the good is subjective, that there's no agreement about what comprises the good, and that the policies that promote themselves by appealing to doing concentrated harm in exchange for diverse good, which is basically any kind of communitarianism thing. They assume the outcome of the diffuse good that they're going to attain and can't explain the mechanism by which it's attained, while concurrently ignoring the concentrated harm they induce because it's not diffuse enough to matter. So obviously, those utilitarian kind of processes are sad and wrong and horrible. Yeah, if you're being a douche, just if he's being a douche, just put him on timeout, okay? I got a sense he was a douche pretty early on. I already removed one of his comments, so you don't need to afford him any cushion. That agreement is the love of law. What agreement is the love of law? I don't know. The one thing I know for sure, Eileen, is that you will never be satisfied by hearing what type you are, no matter what type it is. The law of love. What's the law of love? Is it titties draw the eye? Thank you, Jonathan Buchanan. Titties draw the eye, I think, is probably the number one law of love. And it's not really a law of love, but it's a law of titties. And No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you could be in the middle of brain surgery. If titties appear before your eyes, like in your field of vision, your eyes will gravitate to them. You know, titties. When Horse Mumbler and I were in the parking lot of Sabino Canyon Recreation Area of the Coronado National Forest, and we were getting back in the car, who should walk up beside us and get into a car right next to us but two young ladies, one of whom, I mean, she had on a shirt, and it was a perfectly fine shirt. I'm sure well made. I'm sure substantial. But it was obviously odd and daunted and not up to the challenge of these titties that were in the shirt, because it just bountifully flowed forth from it. I gotta tell you, I just like, damn girl, like that. Yeah. Well, Candace, you have nice titties. That's good to hear. I'll tell you something. Rachel has got quite a rack on her. For a small frame girl, especially, she's got quite a rack. And, you know, if I could, on multiple metrics, if I could, like, it would be okay socially to do it, and it would be okay with YouTube, and it would be okay with her, and it would be okay with everything, I would totally show you the picture of her titties that she sent me onto my phone the other day. But that's never going to happen. All those factors are never going to come into play. So I'm not going to be able to show you guys that picture of her titties that she sent me on my phone. It is so nice, though, to hear your phone and look at it, and unexpectedly there'd just be titties right there, you know, in your message. It's nice. I like that. So, that's a pretty ballsy move there, Flow State. If I had been single, I was thinking that probably would have said something like, you know, you overflow with abundant charms, and I appreciate your comfort with that, you know. Thank you for sharing with us all. Good job. Oh, fuck no. I'm not gonna. I didn't even. No, I don't want to show other people pictures of my girlfriend's boobs, really, to be honest. You know, when I said if, well, ifs and buts for candies and nuts, we'd all Merry Christmas. That's the great thing about conditionality. I can set up antecedents that are never true. So the truth of the conditional is always true, and the consequence is always false. So it doesn't matter. I'm not going to actually do that, obviously. I'm not somebody who makes a mistake of doing wrong like that, you know? Like, if I were to do that, I'd like show it to Taylor after we broke up or something, you know? I figure he's somebody who would be able to appreciate it. This is an ESTP. But I wouldn't show him until after we broke up anyway. So right, he'd never say a thing. I trust him in that regard too. If you want to know that somebody at least is going to be well informed of and likely have clear positions on which aspects of it he's going to respect and which ones he's not going to respect. The bro code. You're in good hands with an ESTP. If I had questions about the bro code, I'd consult Taylor for sure. I'd say, Taylor, I'm a little embarrassed at my lack of knowledge of the bro code, but I have a couple of questions. Is it okay to have sex with your best friend's ex-girlfriend if it's been more than 4 months? That'd be an example of a bro code question. What would be the answer to that question, Taylor? What's the timetable? What's the timetable on fucking your friend's ex-girlfriend? I don't respect the bro code? I don't? It's quite a harsh critique. Bro code equals pure TEFI. Well, that's why I would need advice on it, obviously. Well, I will say that it's a case-by-case basis. Okay, so Taylor has an answer for it, right? He's not TE, but he has a clear answer for it. No. Yeah, I agree with you, Taylor. I agree with that. But, here's the thing. If your bro is all like, I miss Julie so much, and you're like, well, I got some good news for you. She's not super sad. I comforted her last night. She loved it. She said, oh, thank God I'm finally with somebody who knows how to fuck. Then that would be. Taylor, you have to have such a harsh understanding of justice all the time. I mean, Taylor's right though, Jonathan Buchanan. Your bro isn't being a very good bro if he never talks to you again, given the fact you didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't make an extra point of protecting his tender moistures. She dumped him. She dumped him, Taylor. He didn't break up with her. She dumped him. I know he's monogamous. I'm not asking him what he's doing. I'm asking him about the bro code in general. It's a hypothetical example. It's not about either him or me. Both of us are in relationships. It was his ex. To say that I can't fuck his ex is to deny his ex any agency at all. Right. Either way, that badge is on the market. Brittany, why do you want to bust Taylor's chops? I made no claims about the source of his knowledge regarding bro code. Although I'm confident it's not just from word of mouth. Yeah, we don't need that much market regulation. That understanding of the bro code as protecting a person from having their ex slept with is too much market regulation. The badge requires loving maintenance from my meat plunger. Otherwise, it gets clogged like a sink. 5 to 10% of the relationship length? Fuck that. That's too long. Is it because I'm a coach? It's a good point. Very TI heavy point there, Taylor. Again, it shows a lack of respect for other people's FI. This is the thing. If if your complaint to an ESTP is, but my moisture, their response 90% of the time will be, well, then stop being a bitch. What beer is this? This is non-alcoholic beer. It's called Klaus-Thaler. I don't drink alcohol, but I love beer, so. Well, don't be a bitch. Yeah, it's my second favorite non-alcoholic beer. My first favorite non-alcoholic beer is called Klaus-Thaler Dry Hopped. I can't find it in any stores around here. I'm thinking about ordering some on the internet, maybe. It was one of my things I was going to do when I got home today. I forgot all about it, of course. No, I have the Heineken. I've had the Heineken Zero, and that tastes like Heineken. This tastes more like beer than any other non-alcoholic beer, except for the Klaus-Thaler Dry Hop, which tastes even more like beer. Yeah, I mean, I've largely attempted to let shit slide, ignore stuff that was silly, and not be distracted by his nonsense. But, I wanted to give him a chance to I wanted to give myself a chance to actually respond. It's like he keeps throwing out all this bullshit and then justifying that bullshit by saying things like, I'm too in my feelings or whatever. And I don't want to dignify it with a response, right? A lot of times. But at a certain point, it's just like, okay, enough. You keep saying this bullshit. Just look, I've been trying to be nice, but that's not working. So let me use the truth as I always do instead. Yeah, he was the person who was saying that. Yeah, it was Joel. Octavian Silva, stop! I am not! You know this! You like that? Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, from the get-go, I'm not sure what's going on with him. If he's serious, trolling, sort of better, not really at all, and just trolling. I don't know. It doesn't matter. That's illocutionary frame stuff. The bottom line is, when I respond on the locutionary frame to the meaning of what he says, it doesn't get me anywhere. When I point out he's not saying anything on the locutionary frame, it doesn't get me anywhere. That doesn't mean I have an answer to what it is about the illocutionary frame that's actually the problem, because that's the illocutionary frame and that's subjective data and I can't access it. I mean, that's one interpretation. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe. I can't tell if he's actually just confused, if he's trying to be provocative, or I don't know. It'd be hard to get. It's kind of going to be a guess, if you don't see them talking out loud, you just get their text. Let's see. Jake Horowitz isn't son slang for homie, friend, bro, pal? Oh, I see. Jake Hurwitz says, not my son. Boy is in homie, friend, bro, pal. Look, but bro is crying at me. That's the problem. He is crying, not me. The reason why it isn't relevant because it's the less invasive disruption. But that's not how you evaluate the legitimacy of something. Degree of invasiveness or degree of disruptiveness. I mean, you could say degree of invasiveness, okay, but that presumes ownership of the frame that doesn't exist in advance, and there's nonsense. I always thought a rant was you getting really pissed off. You start talking to someone, then you go off on a tangent. It usually peters itself out eventually. Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't mind being accused of ranting, provided ranting refers to, I guess, provided ranting has a connotation of did a really good job of making all the arguments. Because really, when people say I'm ranting, what I'm probably doing is a good and thorough job of making my point. And they call that ranting because they're grasping, or because I am emoting when I do it. But that doesn't make something less legitimate for any meaningful purpose. But normally the connotation of rant is that something is less legitimate because it's a rant. Of course, it doesn't matter if I'm doing what somebody might perceive as ranty in its displays. My words are what matter in that instance, and you've got to look at the actual words. Whenever I ask people, why do you consider that ranting? The only people who call me a ranter are those who don't answer that question with actual answers. Like, well, why is it a rant? Because you said these outrageous things that weren't warranted. You didn't warrant your claims. You just made random claims. You didn't link back to any kind of definition. Nobody would ever say that to me if they listened to my words. So when they say I'm ranting and I ask them why, they never give me a real answer to it. Because you said this, they give me a heuristic answer. Because there was this display you made that I associate with ranting. Loquacity. Loquacity is one of the metaphysical forces. It's the metaphysical equivalent to gravity. Loquacity. What's my perspective on the concept of the scapegoat? Huh. I mean, the reason there can be I think it was your spelling that ruined your joke, Hembo. Your typing, your typo. Klaus is German via. I think scapegoat exists because people need to concretize that which they oppose. And the only way that they really concretize that which they oppose is by rendering it into a single entity that they can point to and blame. Now, sometimes it is appropriate to collapse blame and place it on one party because that party is actually responsible for a bunch of shit. But I think more likely, if the term scapegoat is being used, it implies they're responsible and they're being unfairly handling more of the blame than they ought to. This is the sort of thing that really represents two vectors. The blame one, that people are much more comfortable with hating an enemy than they are with understanding a problem as not linked to agency like that. The attribution bias. So most problems aren't intentionally caused by people. Well, I know I'm talking about the concept in itself. I'm talking about the things that are correlated to being a scapegoat. The idea that one person can take on all the blame for something that really the blame ought to be distributed for is, first of all, indicative about is usually indicative about of the fact that people are using the wrong kinds of frames for the wrong kinds of things. So if I want to blame a lack of gun laws for gun violence in the United States, and I can point to corollaries like other nations that have stricter gun laws and have much less gun violence, I'd be right in the sense that if we were to start over at the beginning and decide then, coming out the gate, do we want to be a country that has strict gun laws or lenient gun laws? And if at that point we decided to determine the question on utilitarian grounds, well, what should we predict will happen if we have strict or lenient ones? And if, in this impossible hypothetical, we can currently have access to the data to answer that predictive question definitively, that in fact it would result in more deaths than more strict gun laws, then that would be a good reason to vote for strict gun laws, back if we were starting over as a country. But the fact is that tries to ignore the reality that we have a status quo. In other words, things are the way they are now. We don't get to change the status quo by erasing history and starting over. We have to deal with the status quo as a status quo when making any advocacy in the status quo. No, I mean, so okay. So that's the first thing about the scapegoat concept is that thing. I want to talk about what female HP here says. People can use an event as a scapegoat. I didn't do this because this occurred, which caused me to forget to do it. That's called, that's not a scapegoat, but that's called an external locus of agency. For people who have an external locus of agency, there's difficulty in accountability, basically. They don't take ownership of what happens to them. They think they are the recipient of shit that happens to them. Now, that's maximally attained by somebody who's got, I guess you'd say, a weak sense of agency combined with being a knower. External locus. Loci is the plural. external locus of agency, or another expression is another word they use there. Let me Google it. Control. External locus of control is what they call it. Here, so I would say that locus of control is a vector of personality that is mostly nurture. That is to say, it's something that depends on how you're raised, probably. But here's a link on it. Wait. Here's a link on it. Locus of control. So the other thing I'd say about the scapegoat thing is, okay, so it fits in with people's need to blame, but that